Hey guys, welcome to Tea Time Thursday with me. I hope you guys are doing well. I wanted to take a couple of minutes at the start of this tea time to listen to a song together, and it's by Gone Gone Beyond, and the song is about being here in the present moment and how that's all we have. So hopefully you guys can listen to it during this live and even afterwards. But let's play it for a couple of seconds, right? So it's been a repeating song of mine like all day. How many of you guys have that like song when you like it and you play it like 10 billion times during the day? Totally me. I was like cooking earlier, and I played it and then I played it again. I'm like, here we go, a third time. But let's take a couple of seconds to listen to it, yeah? Let's see. Yeah. So sweet. Okay, so hopefully you guys were able to listen to that for a couple of seconds, and I'll post it in the link so you guys could go and check it out on YouTube and just listen to the song and listen to the instruments and the lyrics and the band's vibe. So it's super sweet. Again, it's been my little song the whole day, actually the whole week. But okay, so today's tea time is about triggers, right? And someone asked me the question of how to be around someone you love who also triggers you. And I thought that was a great fucking question. So we all get triggered, right? As human beings, we will forever get triggered. And that's part of our human existence, right? So even before I start to share about like what triggers are and my experience with it and what I'm learning and the hows, it's also starting this conversation with our feelings, our emotions, our thoughts are okay, and we're human, right? So just a reminder, right? Like, yeah, like it's okay to feel, it's okay to have triggers, it's okay to be uncomfortable, it's okay to have things that arise that are uncomfortable. And I think there's a lot of judgment within ourselves when certain feelings arise or when there's like uncomfortableness. And I just wanted to preface it with, hey, like we're humans, okay? Like it's okay. And yeah, it's okay. There's no bad or wrong, right? Okay, so the first thing that had popped up for me to share is like, what is triggers? Like, what are triggers? It's something that seems to be more around nowadays, and maybe it's my world, maybe it's just a thing that is actually happening, which I think is great, where people are becoming aware of their triggers and are being proactive about it, and rather than like reacting, they're getting curious with them, right? So so I looked it up, right? So per Google, there's a couple of definitions, and this is what I wrote down and what I wanted to share with you guys. So I found that triggers could be things such as smells, seasons, memories, people, words, events, things that spark intense negative, I put like a quote unquote, emotions, anything that sparks history of trauma, past trauma, part of trauma, right? So something that affects our emotional state, often significantly causing overwhelmness or distress, and it affects your ability to remain present in the moment. So, they were like all really good definitions. Excuse me. And the way that I define it is like, yes, a thing, right? It could be a person, it could be a situation, it could be a smell, an event, something that definitely sparks something within you that's reactive, right? That's reactive within you that does cause overwhelmness or like anger or intensity, and that does prevent you from being in the moment, in the here and the now, with whatever is in front of you, with your body. So that's my own definition from just what I've learned and what I've looked up. And if somebody were to ask me on the spot what is trigger, that's what I would say. So yeah. So then also, like, the question was how to be around someone you love who also triggers you, right? And as soon as I read that, the thing that popped up for me was family, parents, friendships, and partners. Because even the person that you love the most could be triggering as fuck, right? So let's talk about it. Let's totally talk about it. And I wanted to kind of start off with, like, what do we do, right? Like, a lot of this also is awareness of, and this is part of also like getting to know yourself and spending like time alone and being honest with yourself, because this is where, when you get triggered, it's really good, because there's moments where you pause and you kind of step back and you get curious with it, right? Rather than like, boom, reactive, I'm gonna yell, I'm gonna do this, I'm gonna do that. It's a moment of, okay, pause, hold on, there's like uncomfortable feelings. Like, what is this, right? Hey, Alex. Talking about triggers. Okay, so for me, and this is something that I've been learning, right? And that I've been practicing, and that I've been practicing for a while now, which is when I do feel that I'm getting triggered, right? Before, there was a pattern of just stoic, closed off walls, right? And I had a judgment within myself that it was bad. And sometimes I didn't even know that I was being triggered. It was just, okay, there's this feeling, and boom, it was an instant wall. Don't want to talk. Serious. Can you guys see me still? Okay, something was happening there. I got a phone call. Okay, so I think it's back to normal now. Right? So there was a judgment. I had a judgment within myself. And what did I put it on here too. Yeah, there was a judgment on myself. Oh yeah, the whole time, right? During that space, I was giving myself shit for it, but also I was trying to get out of it on my own. Like, get out of it, like, there's nothing to worry, like, just really minimizing my own triggers and not trying to be curious with it or anything, just realizing that I was upset or whatever, right? And trying to get out of it. Like, get over it, like, bounce back. And that is not the most healthiest way to go about it, right? So the first one that I've also learned through my own therapy is being curious with it. And in those moments, because there is those intensity and there's so much going on within, it's not like, okay, let me get curious with it, right? Because sometimes we can't. So in the moment, it's asking ourselves, can I get curious with it, right? So that's the first thing that I've learned to use. And again, it's practice. It's fucking practice. So yeah, it's getting curious. Like, can I be curious with this trigger right now, right? What is arising for me at the moment, in this moment, right? What are the feelings and the thoughts? So in these spaces, you become curious with it like a scientist, like an observer, right? You observe yourself, you observe your feelings, your thoughts, and in a way you kind of step back and take a look at it, right? So the second thing that I've done in these moments is it my shit or is it their shit, right? Because again, before, if there was those feelings, it'd always be a battle between, no, it's them, right? Like, it's their fault and XYZ and get out of it. And I was disconnected from who I was and my own stuff and my values and my beliefs and maybe who I also was entirely, to even ask myself the question, like, is this my trigger? And I also wasn't even aware of these concepts either, right? So I wasn't aware that these triggers were from, or could be from XYZ that happened when I was like in freaking third grade, right? Or just like a year ago. So it's good to ask ourselves, right? So the second is this your shit or my shit? And again, ask this to yourself. Because if it's yours, you can continue to be curious with it, right? You can continue to ask yourself certain questions. And yeah, I'll read this right now. Hackney? Hopefully I said that right. Thank you for being here. But yeah, so it's getting curious, right? So it's getting curious with your own trigger of like, okay, what am I experiencing? Like, what's arising for me? And sometimes in those moments when you're being curious and you're asking yourself questions, something pops up, like a memory, a story of some sort, like, oh, like I'm having these feelings arise because Polly in the third grade, like, was bullying me and those words match and it's the same energy, right? So in those moments, it's like, okay, like, obviously I'm still holding to that. Like, what is the next step for me to let go of this, or to let go of that story, or to release it, or to release it in my brain, my body, and emotionally, right? I think I just said that. But yeah, so, and then it's like, if it's theirs, it also arises, right? So if it's theirs, we can totally explore it with them, whoever it is. It can be your partner, your mom, your dad, the person that you love, right? You can explore it with them and ask them the same questions you would ask yourself. Like, hey, what is it that you're experiencing? Which is something that became such more of an affirmation when I went to Canada and I did this Rubenfeld training, where you could get curious with them, like, hey, what's arising for you, right? Like, what are you noticing within your body? Like, what's coming through, right? And that's something that my partner and I have been practicing, right? Like, when one of us has certain feelings come up, we kind of are aware of it. So we'll ask each other, like, hey, what is it that you're experiencing? Like, what are you noticing? You know, and it's changed so much the way that we communicate, right? It's become so much more open. But yeah, but if they're not willing to explore it, right? I'm pretty sure all of us have at least one person in our circles that we love and that are so close to our hearts that are not really explorative mentally, emotionally, spiritually, physically. And it's okay, right? It's totally okay. It's where everybody's at. Everybody has a journey and it's totally okay, right? And that's the part where we also can't change people, right? We can't change people to think a way, to open up a different way, to experience life a certain way, to change their journey. We can't do that, right? But we could only take control of our own actions and feelings and thoughts and what we can do about it, right? So part of that, right, if they're not in that space and if they're in denial or it just keeps popping up and you are at that point where, okay, it's their shit, like, it's not mine, also get explorative within yourself, like, ask, or like, yeah, being curious about the relationship and that trigger or whatever they're sharing with you. Hopefully that makes sense. If you have any questions, please let me know. Because in those moments when you get explorative like that, something will also arise. Like, oh, it's the way that they're talking to me. Like, that's not very respectful. Like, oh, it's like their energy. Like, something's going on there and Like, I'm cool, but I can see that they're not cool with me, right? Yeah, so in those moments, again, something will pop up. And that's the part where, again, it goes back to you and like what you can do to be in that space with him, right? Which I'm going to go to the next part of it. But yeah, so in those moments too, again, that's where like boundaries arise, right? Like boundaries, like even talking to them in a different way where it's kind of like, hey, like I've noticed that, you mentioned this and this, please don't talk to me that way. Like, hey, you know what? Like, these are my boundaries, XYZ, and it's okay, right? Like, there might be some kind of reaction, but again, that's not your shit. So, I'm gonna title this, Your Shit or My Shit. But yeah. So then the third part to this, because if it is yours, right? Going back to if it is yours, there's tools that you can use, right? I mentioned being explorative and being curious with it, but there's also more to it, right? So you can tap it out, right? Like, and I'll share a story too. You can totally tap it out. And what do I mean by tap it out, right? So you can tap, and it's called Emotional Freedom Technique, right? EFT. I believe I have a book. Maybe it's up here. And I'll share it. And there's videos online where they guide you to tap. And it's like meridian points. We have them here, 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 the bottom, and then like on the top, right? And in that moment, you start off with like, you know what? Even though this person triggered me and I feel really triggered and annoyed and overwhelmed, I still completely love and accept myself. And you say that 3 times. And then like as you go and tap, you say what you're feeling. Like, I'm so pissed. Like, how could you say that? Like, man, I don't know why I'm feeling this way. Like, why do I feel like I want to throw something or punch a wall? What is going on, right? So you keep going, right? Like, fuck this shit. Like, this person's so annoying. You keep going, right? When you get to the top, then you take a pause and you take a deep breath in and sit with yourself for a couple of minutes. And you do it again, right? And maybe I'll do a video about tapping. So that's a pretty good idea. Maybe next tea time I can do that. It's something that I share on my pillow talk. Sometimes I'll bring that tool under my belt. But tap it out. And in those moments, again, things pop. Things arise, right? So I had an instance years ago where on a weekend, all of my friends were busy. My best friend was busy, like another really good friend was busy, and they were all doing their own thing, and I'm very open and accepting. Like, I totally understand, doing your own thing and individuality and having our own lives. And in that space, like, I remember being really sad that, like, my friends were busy, and I felt really, I think, what did I go? It was lonely, and also, I think, like, disappointed, I believe it was. And in that moment, like, I knew that it wasn't who I am. Like, I was aware, right? Again, that awareness helps so much when you start to learn it, because they really come through in these moments, right? So I was like, okay, like, I'm feeling these feelings, but they don't match up with, like, with knowing who I am and with our friendships, right? So then I started to tap, right? I was like, okay, like, I'm, like, why? Like, even though, my friends are busy this weekend, and, like, I'm not doing anything this weekend, and I feel these feelings, like, I still completely love and accept myself. Right now, I'm like, why am I feeling this way? Like, I feel alone. I feel like they rejected me. I feel like, they don't want me. I feel like I'm not invited. Like, why not? Like, right? And as I was doing it, what popped up was, and that's another story too for another tea time, but my own trauma of being relinquished as a baby. And so as I was doing that, it popped up like, oh, my mom left me, so of course my friends would too. And in that moment, I was like, oh, fuck. Like, I did not know that. Like, I did not know that trigger or those feelings came from this, right? And in that moment, it also feels very releasing, because sometimes you don't even have to do anything about it. Just being aware that comes from a certain memory, a certain event, a certain thing. It's like, oh, I get it. Okay. Right? And you just release what happened that weekend, and it was like, okay, like, I guess I'm still hurt about that. Right? So you can tap it out. So the other thing is meditate, sit with it, do absolutely nothing with it. Just be aware of it, right? Journal it out, right? Journal out what you're feeling, your thoughts, journal out how it's so fucking triggering, journal out what you think they're doing, right? Get curious with it as you're journaling and ponder on it, go for a run, right? Running helps me a lot when those feelings arise. It kind of makes me release it and be like, okay, hold on, right? And then also, if you have a therapist or a life coach, talk to them about it, right? Explore it with them. That's what they're there for. So I have a couple of examples, right, of this. And one of them is with my dad. Love my dad to pieces. He is fucking a beautiful human being and a beautiful soul. And I've always mentioned in like birthday posts and Father's Day posts that he is literally one of my greatest teachers in my life, right? But of course, right? We still get triggered by the people that we love and the people that are dearest to our hearts. He was one of them, right? And a couple years ago, I started doing therapy with my beautiful therapist, Melva, and I started to open up more to that space of getting to know myself, of being, accepting of my humanity, of my feelings and my emotions, and what's not okay and what is okay. And one of the things that I came to realize when I was in therapy and when, I came back from Vietnam was that sometimes during our phone conversations and even interactions, he would make jokes, right? And every single time, like, these jokes were being made, and it felt off. Like, I felt mad and uncomfortable, yet I didn't say anything, right? So I would hang up the phone, and it would just, like, I would feel that way for hours afterwards, right? And as I was becoming more open to, like, this space and talking to my therapist about it through, like, one session, I was like, oh, like, that is not okay. Like, he's making jokes, but he's putting me down, right? And if you grew up in a collective and meshed family system, and maybe Hispanic family too, there is, it's some type of energy where you just don't speak up, right, with your parents. Like, you don't talk to them a certain way because it's disrespectful, right? So I was becoming more aware of that and how that was also unhealthy. So we were on this one time, right, we were on the phone call and he was making the jokes again. And this time I was aware, like, this is not okay. Like, I don't want jokes to be played like that. Like, if jokes are going to be like that, I don't want to have a conversation with him. So I was pretty, okay, grounded, right? So we were on the phone, and again, he started playing around and making these jokes. And I'm like, hey, Dad, I was like, I don't like these jokes. And he made another joke. And I was like, Dad, like, I just said it. Please don't joke with me like that. Like, I don't like it. Like, it's not nice. He said it again, right? And I'm like, he said another joke, right? So it was just, like, joke after joke. And I'm like, Dad, I was like, if you say it one more time, like, I'm just going to hang up the phone on you. Or, like, yeah, that's what I said. And in that moment, again, like, if you're part of this family, it's like, fuck, like, is he gonna take out the chancla, right? And again, he played another joke, right? I think he said I was, like, sensitive or something, and I just hung up. And no joke, guys, like, after that conversation, like, I was shaking, because it reverted back to, like, being a kid and speaking up and getting in trouble for it. Like, oh my God, am I gonna get reprimanded? Like, uh-oh, right? But even though it felt scary and also, like, I was kind of, like, shaking here and there, I was able to talk to my friends about it, and we were able to kind of, like, talk about it and vent about it. I was able to share, and it became more of a release, but also an affirmation of, like, okay, yes, like, this is the right thing to do. And it felt better too, which is crazy. Like, it felt good. So it was, like, a bittersweet, all of the emotions, scary and, like, anxiety ridden maybe, but at the same time it felt releasing and, like, exciting and, like, freedom in some ways. And it's crazy because since then he hasn't played jokes like that. And it was awkward at first, right? Because it's like, okay, how do you maneuver through a conversation when that has been your conversation for 25 plus years, right? And for a while I thought, like, okay, maybe I'm just not going to have a relationship with him. Like, if this is how it is and we just can't have a conversation, like, I guess, right? Other than just, how are you? Good, how are you? Good. But I'm very blessed that both my parents eventually like think about it and they have their own processing and like they do change their habits, right? So ever since then, like he hasn't played jokes like that with me, and we've been able to talk about like other stuff in our conversation. So it's actually been better. So it's crazy because in those moments, like you set your boundaries, like right, you get curious with like you get curious with it, and then at some point you set a boundary, and sometimes they're not okay with it. Like there's many moments where I've set boundaries with my family, and at first it's not a peaceful conversation. It's a little bit chaotic and a little bit like, and it's a reminder like, hey, I have to put my foot down with this and what I want and what's okay. But sometimes people come around, right? Like they have their own way of processing, and some people will come around and we'll talk about it, and other times you just notice that there's a change and it does become healthier, right? So yeah. So going into like the boundaries a little bit, but okay. So the other thing with that too, right? Like setting boundaries that I really want to add is that sometimes it feels scary to set boundaries, right? Again, if you grew up in this type of household, enmesh, collective, Hispanic, whatever, sometimes it's scary to set a boundary because you think that it's going to be like disrespectful, that there's going to be like a war in a way of like fights, and you think that like you're never going to have a relationship with them, so you'd rather just stay quiet. But sometimes it's not like that. Like, and part of setting the boundary is that you'll also get to experience it, how sometimes you do set a boundary, and yeah, it might be a little chaotic at first, not chaotic, a little not peaceful at first, but it comes back around, and the relationship sometimes gets so much better because of it, right? So, okay, so let's see. I'm reading something. Okay, I know Hacky mentioned you're basically basing the trigger that's something bad, right? That would cause you to be a certain way or to do certain things that's probably negative, right? No, I'm not saying bad or right or negative or positive. So maybe when, what's it called? When I end my tea time, you can see the beginning of it, because I wanted to preface it with saying how there's no judgment, right? Like there's no labels to bad, good, positive, or negative. How we're all human beings and we all get triggered. It's part of our human existence, right? But it's just what we do with it. Right? Sometimes we get triggered and we're really reactive, and we want to do things that are not the most healthiest, right? Like we want to break somebody's window, we want to like slap someone, which I even mentioned it on one of my stories that, like I just want to slap this one person because they trigger me so much. But that's not like the best thing to do. So it's what we do with it, right? Like, what do I do with that person? Like, I've distanced myself from them, right? Which is a great bridge to the how, right? So maybe I can send you the tea time too, and you have any other questions, feel free to reach out. But, okay, so the how. How to be around someone you love who also triggers you. Okay, so you can use all of this, right? And sit with it and see how it works for you, see what feels right, and take action on that, right? If you have questions, let me know. Totally here for you. 2, you could also limit your time with them, right? So you don't have to spend the whole day with them. Maybe it can just be the morning. Maybe it could just be a breakfast and be done with it, right? Don't feel obligated to spend time with them. Yeah. So 3rd is having a mantra before you spend time with them, and even during, right? So you can create a little mantra of, like, he is trying his best. She is trying her best. I'm trying my best. I'm really trying my best here. Hey, Michael. Hey, Sabrina. So we're talking about triggers. I'm close to ending my tea time, but... Oh, I was like, Sabrina wants to be on my tea time? I think you canceled it, but I was like, oh my god, yes! Canceling, or I was gonna say, tea time has been extended for another hour. But yeah, the how, right? So the third, again, it's like a mantra, right? Like create a mantra for yourself or look up mantras online of people that trigger you or when you feel triggered. There's a lot of them. And if you want to explore a mantra together, reach out, right? And one that connects with this one is also creating a bubble around yourself. So, hey, Eric. So, creating a bubble around yourself. So, one of the things that I've practiced with this, with people who I love, that I want to be around with, but that are also triggering, is that there's been times where I pretend I put on a raincoat. So when you put on a raincoat, you go outside and the water doesn't hit you, right? Like it's a protection from the water getting you wet. So I'll pretend to put a raincoat, I want to say it differently, but I pretend to put a raincoat and I go into, like this space with them, and whenever they say something, I can literally feel how it just like bounces off. Like it doesn't affect me, right? It's just like, oh, okay, right? Hey! So that's also another one that you can do. It's a visualization before, and it doesn't take that long, right? It can be like literally 30 seconds out of your life before you enter the group of people that you love that are also triggering. So the other one is connecting to your breath, right? So the moment that you realize that you are starting to feel this feeling, connect to your breath. And totally works, like I mentioned earlier in my tea time, that when you start to work on mindfulness tools and the techniques, and when you start to become an observer of your thoughts and your feelings and of your life, you're much more aware when certain feelings arise and when you can take a pause and take a step back, right? So it's super interesting because I went to Mexico to see a family with my mom, and there was a person, I'm not going to be super specific with people, but there was a person, family member, and they were starting to say something, right? And in that moment, I could feel myself being triggered. And the narrator maybe 2 years ago would have said something back. And it would have been saying something back to defend who they were talking about and to defend the situation, to prove a point, to be right. And in that moment, I could feel it. Like, it was crazy. It's like I could feel it from, like, right here, right? Like, starting to get super triggered and wanting to be like, And in that moment, I took a deep breath in, like, okay. And what came up for me, right, like a little mantra was, there's different stories, right, to the situation. And this is just their story. And he kept talking, or the person kept talking, and I just kept saying that to myself. Like, there's different stories, there's different truths. This one is this person's, and it's okay, right? And rather than, again, reacting and all this other stuff, I was able to just sit there, connect to my breath, repeat this mantra, and just let this person talk. And that was it. Like, once the person was done talking, like, I just walked away. And I was like, okay, thanks for sharing, right? So it could really help a lot. Yeah, and 6 is also cut people off. So cut people off. I know it's not easy, and especially when it's like family members and it's close people that you have memories with, that you grew up with. Like, it's hard to do that, right? And that goes definitely for you to know in your core and to really get in touch with your own within to see how that feels for you and to make that choice. Hey, Efrain! And to make that choice, right? And there's so much more about, like, cutting people off. And again, it goes back to also being curious. Like, is it your trigger? Is it theirs? Like, what is it? What are the non-negotiables? What is, like, are they more damaging in a way? Like, are they bringing your energy more than up? Like, there's so many factors to it. So So yeah. Okay. So I was gonna say too, like one of the things that I've done too, like there's this one person who, again, not gonna say like, specific names and stuff, but there's one person who has been like the most triggering person in my life for the last couple of years. And what I've done, right, it's like I've tried the different techniques of talking about it in therapy. I've tried to have a conversation with this person about the way that I feel and my thoughts with it. Like I've tried to be in that space with that person as a friend. And for me, in that experience, it felt like every time it felt more draining than anything. It wasn't even like, okay, a little bit of a fuel up, right? Like, okay, I think we're cool or whatever. No, it just always felt draining. And I didn't cut the person completely off, but I most definitely distanced myself as much as I could. Almost basically cutting off. But again, it's also a process. So give yourself grace and be gentle with yourself, right? And don't judge it. Like, don't judge it as good, bad, negative, positive. Just label it, maybe name it as just your human experience and being part of human in this world. So, yeah. So thank you guys for popping up and saying hi and just showing up. So I was going to share a little bit about my trip Well, I went to Mexico with my mom and my niece to visit family and to visit family, and I saw, my grandparents' old home, and it was bittersweet, right? It was totally bittersweet because last time when I went, my grandparents were alive. Like, it was a beautiful home, and now, like, my grandparents aren't there, and the home also isn't what it used to be. So it was bittersweet, right? Like, I went in there, and there's, like, tears, and it was kind of like I don't want to say, like, a shock, but because I've been doing all this work of, like, the ancestral and in my family healing and all that stuff, it was a totally different feeling being in that land and being more in touch with my roots in a different way, right? So that was really, really, really nice. It was so nice to see family members that I haven't seen in a while. And it also brought a lot of awareness, right? A lot of awareness of, like, maybe I'll do another tea time, right, about that. But it brought a lot of awareness of my upbringing. And I understood my upbringing so much more. And, like, oh, like, I can see why I react that way. Like, oh, I can, like, some of the stuff I don't understand still, like, oh, why is, this such a big thing? Like, I don't understand that. But this is what my family is? Okay. So there's a lot of, like, that pondering, which is also very good. And then I came back for, like, 2 days, and I worked, and then, like, I left again to Canada, and I'm currently doing a Rubenfeld Synergy course. So it's what my therapist is trained in, and I was back and forth with going back to school, and like, I did the application for one of the schools in Colorado, and whoop whoop, like, I got accepted, and super exciting, but at the same time, this course that my therapist is doing feels like more of a call to my heart and to my soul. And it's a body-mind modality, so it's kind of getting in touch with the trauma that's stored in your body, and it's with touch. I love interaction with human beings and so much more. So stay tuned, because after October I'll be needing some practice clients. So if you're available, let me know and we can do something with that. And that was also very cool, right? Like, my partner also decided to do the training. So that was also very, 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 what's the word? I'm very grateful, right? Because not only is he also interested in doing this type of work, and he has been for a while, it's also helped so much of our bond and our connection with each other and how to communicate. Like I mentioned earlier, right? Like, what are you experiencing right now? And you can totally tell, like, our relationship has shifted to a whole different way of being and more towards, like, how we want our lives individually but together. So it's really, really cool and super sweet, and yeah. I'm like, I fell in love with him even more. So, and then I came back, right, for another 2 days, and again, like, I worked, and it was a last minute thing. I was gonna cancel my trip to Guatemala, because the last two trips, like, I was evened out, right, and I was thinking, oh my god, if I go to Guatemala, like, I'm gonna be at a negative. Hey, Esley! So I was like, if I go to Guatemala, I might be at a negative. And like, no joke, like, I was working, and I, like, that day my flight was at 9 p.m. and I was working, and I had even texted my boss, like, hey, by the way, like, I might cancel that request. Is it okay if I just, like, clock in, right, for the rest of the week? And I talked to my best friend about it. Like, there's, like, just so many thoughts going on, right? And I was talking to my partner, and we went through, like, finances, and I was like, wait, I can do this. Like, I just gotta move some stuff around, but I can do it. And it ended up going. So I came home, packed everything, and we went to the airport, and I left. And it was pretty cool, because that felt like the cherry on top to everything that had been happening on my trips, like the within, where, excuse me, like, I went with my friend, right? So this friend I met when I was living in Vietnam. I had to do like a visa run every 3 months, and for the one of them I went to Cambodia, and she's from Austria, and she went to Cambodia for like a 10-day Vipassana retreat, and we met at a temple, and we literally just clicked, like, felt like if we knew each other, and we stayed in contact since then. Like, there was not maybe like more than 3 months where we wouldn't call each other and just caught up with each other's lives, right? So she was in South America. She's like, hey, I'm gonna be here, like, how can we meet? And I'm like, well, let me look at it. We decided to choose Guatemala, right? And we went to Lake Atitlan, right? And it was like a spiritual couple of days. We did a cacao ceremony. We did breath work one of the mornings. We meditated. I went into the water, and we didn't do much, but it felt like we did a lot in terms of filling our own cup. And a lot of stuff, again, came up from my family, and then what I had learned through the synergists, like, came through as like a wraparound, and then that was like the cherry on top. I don't know what words to describe the whole experience, but it felt like all of it was totally meant to be the way that it was, and what happened, and the thoughts and the feelings that I had, like, just all of it was just meant to be. And I hope you guys, I think you guys know what I'm talking about when those events happen in your life. But yeah, great trip. Like, it brought a lot of those memories of, like, traveling by myself and traveling to different countries by myself, and it was really nice. It totally filled my cup. But yeah, maybe I'll share more on my tea time. I know it's going to be like an hour on being here. But yeah, for those who are on here right now, thank you for being here. I shared more about triggers and what they are, and I shared how to get curious with it, and also what to do when we love somebody and they're triggering us fuck. Or is it us? Alright, good question. But yeah, let's see, what else do I want to share about my trip? Esley, I brought you something, so next time I see you, it's something really, really little, but a lot of love. Yeah, we stayed at a hostel, and it was funny. We stayed at a hostel, right? Just like last story. One of the nights we stayed at a hostel, and there was like, if you've been to hostels or if you know what they're at, like, you rent a bed in a room full of other travelers. And that's how I started to travel, and I absolutely love it because I get to meet other people from different parts of the world. And you just spark conversation with them, and, like, for me, it's like I love learning about people and their stories, and it just happens, right? But yeah, the first night we were there, and my friend there's bunk beds, right? So I had the top bunk, and my friend had the bottom, and it was already really late, so people were sleeping. And there was like a little roly-poly on my bed, and I was like, shit, like, there's a little, like, insect, what do I do? And I was like, okay, you know what, like, it was on my pillow side, so I was like, okay, you know what, I'm just gonna sleep on the other side. But before I did that, like, I flicked it, and I didn't realize that it probably landed on my friend, but but the next day I was telling her the story, and she looked at me, like, super serious, and she was like, you flicked it onto my bed. And I was like, oh shit, I'm so sorry. So that was hilarious. But yeah, okay. Well, thank you guys for being here. I love you guys. And my new decor, shout out to my partner because he helped me with it. Like, I could not get these up. And I think my dad probably gave up too. And my partner came and hero of the day. So, yeah. Okay, much love, guys. I hope that you guys have a beautiful weekend. So, bye.